Modern Dadhood. Modern Dadhood podcast.
There she blows.
Another podcast episode.
Is it?
That's why I showed up.
I didn't know I was signing on for that.
So let's get into the episode that we have now determined that we're making.
Okay. I'm just making sure that our listeners know that they are listening to Modern Dadhood, which is an ongoing conversation about the joys, the challenges, and the general insanity of being a dad in this moment. Hold for applause. Have I done that? I've done that joke, haven't I?
Yeah.
Damn it.
Oh yeah, it's totally worn out.
I'm on repeat. Man, I just had a birthday. I'm 42 now.
Yeah.
So I'm just recycling stuff. My name, by the way, just for the record, my name, by the way, Marc Checkett, and I'm a dad to twin boy, I'm going to start saying almost 6-year-olds. They're getting closer to 6 years of age.
My name's Adam Flaherty, and I'm a father to two daughters who are 9 and 6. Do you want to tell new listeners, if there's people who maybe this is their first episode of Modern Dadhood, or maybe they've only heard a couple, give them a quick rundown of what to expect?
Listen, if this is your first episode of the show, first of all, welcome. And don't leave. Don't leave. Don't go. Stop. Wait. Tell them what? Tell them about how it's an interview show? Tell them about how you and I are not experts, but we're just a couple of regular Joes, a couple of dinks. Sometimes we refer to ourselves as being dinks. We are two dads trying to figure our way through things, and we enjoy talking to each other about this kind of stuff, and we enjoy talking to other dads about it. So once in a while, actually once an episode, we have a guest, a special guest, and sometimes those guests are experts, wouldn't you say, Adam?
Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. Today our guest is someone who I'm really excited to speak with, actually. I'm not going to tease it. I'm just going to come right out and say...
You're teasing it a little bit.
Our guest is a father and a grandfather. He was the official White House photographer for both terms of Barack Obama's presidency and also the second term of Ronald Reagan's presidency. He's written many books. He's the recipient of many awards and incredible accolades. His name is Pete Souza, and I cannot wait to get him in here soon.
Not our first grandfather either on the show.
Also, not our first guest who has worked in the White House.
Also true. Yeah. Oh, that's true.
I do want to say, though, before we get to Pete, I just want to remind listeners that every episode of Modern Dadhood, and we've had some really cool guests and some really interesting, thoughtful topics. Every episode is available on our website, moderndadhood.com. Just hit the episodes button and you can search by topic or by guest, or just scroll through the whole list of all the artwork. But anywhere you can find podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeart.
There you go.
Just
Pocket
search Modern
Casts.
Dadhood. Anyway, though, let's get into this because it's going to be a great chat. We'll bring Pete Souza in real soon for you. Marc.
What? Yes. No, I was paying attention.
Did you actually fall asleep?
Yes.
So do you find that do you spend a lot of time telling them stories about like who you were before being their dad?
I do tell stories about me and about my life. Most of them revolve around me getting hurt in some way. I'm not sure how that sort of started.
Is it like they'll get hurt or, do something clumsy, get hurt, cry, and as you're consoling them, that's a way to like make them feel better about being clumsy?
No, actually, it was more like I think it started because I think we were talking to the kids about the consequence of not listening to like your parents. And instead of just being like, you better listen to us, or else.
Yeah.
I decided to tell a story about when I was younger and I broke, I'm not sure which one I told first. I think it was when I broke my ankle. And I was like a young teenager playing basketball with my friends, like out in the rain, and it was cold and it was dark. And my mom kept telling me to come inside. And I was like, shut up, Mom. And then because it was cold and rainy and dark, I slipped and fell and broke my ankle.
Probably exactly the thing that she said would happen too.
Basically.
You'll fall and break your ankle.
Yeah. Shut up, Mom.
Do you embellish at all just for the sake of, telling a dramatic, engaging story?
Periodically, yeah. I'll add. I won't add details, but I will draw things out and I will make things seem more. I try to do it like we're watching a movie.
Yeah.
Like I add all those little details to make it
dramatize a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
The girls don't ask. Well, I guess they do ask about, what we were like before we got married and stuff like that. And I just sometimes I have trouble coming up with stories. Like I've had incredible experiences, but sometimes these stories don't just immediately come to mind.
Yeah.
Usually it's just because over the years, by chance, I've met a lot of famous people. And so usually it's they'll be watching something and I'll say, Anna Kendrick, she grew up in Portland, just up the road from here. I met her a bunch of years ago and talked to her for an hour. And they'll be like, you met Anna Kendrick? And I'm like, yeah, it's not that big of a deal. She's just a person. And it's fun to see that she's gone on to have such an amazing career.
Yeah.
I got thinking about storytelling and the stories that will stick with us throughout our lives that we'll continue to tell our kids and then share with our grandkids one day. And I was thinking about all of this in the context of preparing to chat with Pete Souza, who has had this impressive, illustrious career as a photographer who has been in these incredible situations that are so exclusive that so few people would have access to. And what he can pass on to his family just through sort of spoken word.
He can pass it on through spoken word, but if anybody's like, hey, pics or it didn't happen, pal.
Right. He's like, oh, no big deal. I just have several million.
Yeah.
Let me just plug in this thumb drive.
Let me just grab one of my books off the shelf that I wrote.
Let's have Pete come into the conversation and we'll get down to some of our questions here. I got a lot of them.
Yeah.
I hope he's got about 3 hours.
Yeah.
Because I got a ton. Pete Souza has more accolades and accomplishments than most, including Pulitzer Prize winner, New York Times bestseller, International Photography Hall of Fame inductee, documentary film subject, and official White House photographer for 2 U.S. presidents. He lives in Madison, Wisconsin with his wife, Patty. He's a father, a grandfather, and I might be going out on a limb here, but I'm guessing he may be on texting terms with Barack Obama. So we're delighted, Pete, to have you on the podcast. Thanks for coming on Modern Dadhood.
You bet. Thanks for having me on.
How are things going? I obviously, your fire hose period of your career is a bit behind you now, but I'm guessing you're probably not one to just kind of kick back and retire. What's been keeping you busy?
Oh, man, I got so many things going on. Tomorrow, I'm headed to the Benjamin Harrison Presidential Library to give a talk. And then next week, I'm headed to Ghana to do a workshop with some of the photojournalists there. I think I leave next Tuesday, so a week from today, actually.
Oh, wow. Yeah, not exactly just putting your feet up.
No, yeah.
So for those of our listeners who, for some reason or another, maybe aren't familiar or haven't had the opportunity to get familiar with your career. It's a long career. It's an illustrious career. And at this stage in your life, how do you sort of sum up, if you do, what you've accomplished thus far for people?
Have you refined an elevator pitch for the last 40 plus years?
Clearly the work that I will be best known for during my career is from the Obama administration. Mm-hmm. But I've done so many things that just didn't get near that much attention because I was working for newspapers, and the only people that knew about what I was doing were the readers of those newspapers. And I freelanced for 9 years at one point and had some work published in National Geographic back in the 90s. So what I always tell people is that I don't think I'm the best photographer in the world, but I think that all the experiences that I had leading up to 2009 made me absolutely the right person to be the chief official White House photographer for President Obama. I'll believe that until I leave this place. I just think I was the right person. I had known him for 4 years before he became president. I had a professional relationship with him already, and I worked at the White House before. During President Reagan's administration, I had been in every conceivable situation as a photojournalist. And so I just thought that, that I was the right person for that job.
Well, there's so much, obviously with photography, there's so much skill involved and ton of knowledge that you need to get to where you were as a photographer, but also then with something like being a photojournalist, following a particular person around, so much of that must have, like, your success there. You, and I imagine would be able to sort of anticipate a little bit his movement, or so much of it must come down to just snap judgments and a really good understanding of timing, I suppose.
Oh yeah, it's the kind of the type of photographer I am. It's trying to capture a moment, and it does involve anticipation. It does involve timing. It does involve precision. It does involve at times, luck. If you miss the moment, you've missed it forever. It's gone. Yeah. And I think that was probably, in many ways, that was the most stressful part about the job is, and it was stressful on myself. I caused my own stress because I didn't ever want to miss anything. So,
right.
You're always trying to be on.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes me, I just recently, I listened to an interview of yours it was maybe several years ago, where you described sitting in the, now I'm not going to remember the name of it, the limousine in the motorcade.
The spare.
That the president is not, the spare. Yeah, you told this great story about capturing the faces of people who are looking in, thinking.
Yeah. Because
they might see the president, but they see you.
I rode it. The spare is a duplicate of his limousine. His limousine. Somebody nicknamed it the Beast for whatever reason. Right. And I rode in what was essentially the decoy. We were in the decoy. Think about that for a second.
Yeah.
And it was exact same car, and it was usually, not all the time, but it was usually one car ahead of his. Okay. So if you're along the motorcade route as somebody looking to see the president, you see this big black car with the American flag coming, and you're like, this is the president's car. And I sat in the same seat that he sat in his car. So they see my car first, they look in my window, and they're expecting to see, the president of the United States. And instead, they probably see me sticking my camera out the window, taking a picture of them, because it was just such an interesting juxtaposition to watch that anticipation that they're going to see the president, and then instead they see, myself and probably a Secret Service agent. And then 5 seconds later, I can hear them screaming because they're now seeing the president, which is kind of fun.
I do want to take a moment quickly early on just to promote. You've got a number of photo books available for purchase. We're going to link to them in the episode notes. But there's also, as I mentioned in the intro, this amazing documentary called The Way I See It, and it's on Amazon Prime. And I'll tell you, I watched that documentary and it was so well done. It's such a compelling story. And 4 or 5 times I watched it alone, and it brought me to tears watching the documentary. And there's so much that goes into, why that would have happened. A big part of that is your story, your incredible history, the amazing photographs, iconic photographs, but also just, and we will try not to get too political in this, because we do want to keep it about sort of fatherhood and parenting and so forth. But just the, overwhelming sadness for where our country is now. And I don't want to say nostalgia. It wasn't forever ago, but how much I miss that time in history when there was this sense of hope and decency and kindness, and there's so many adjectives to describe it, and it was also just such an unprecedented presidency, and you were there documenting all of it. It's just so overwhelming, and the film was so well done. So all that to say, parents listening, please check out the documentary on Amazon Prime. I'll also link that in the episode notes. It's such a wonderful look into who Pete Souza is and your incredible career. So just wanted to make sure to say that and recommend that.
I will note, too, the director, Dawn Porter, while she was working on, the film with me, she was also doing a documentary on John Lewis, Congressman John Lewis. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. So Adam just mentioned fatherhood and parenthood and stuff. And we always ask our guests sort of up front, can you tell us just a little bit about your family, and maybe can we hear a little bit about Pete Souza, the dad? I mean, I think we've heard about a granddaughter who's perhaps maybe the subject of some photography these days, but what can you tell us about your family?
Yeah, I mean, like many families, ours is a little different in that my wife was previously married, and her husband died suddenly of a heart attack when she was 9 months pregnant, and
oh my gosh.
Also with a 2-year-old at home. And I met her 4 or 5 years later, and became a big brother to her son when he was 3 or 4. And then later, I started dating her, and, we've now been together for 27. So I don't know how long we've been together. I know how long we've been married. We've been married for 10 years, but we've been together for 27, if my math is right, something like that. And I became very close to her kids, and I'm the only father figure they knew. And then our daughter has 2 kids now. They're both about to have their birthday. I'm looking at the date. It's the second one turns 1 in 4 days.
Oh man!
And the older one turns 4 at the end of this month. Yeah.
Did they live close enough that you get to spend a lot of time with them?
They're 2 hours away, which is too far. But we drove up there for Halloween because I had to wear my giraffe costume, and the almost 4-year-old was a unicorn.
So I'm just trying to think. I'm trying to do some math too in my head as I'm listening to you talk about 1 and 4-year-old grandkids. And it seems like, looking from the outside with your time during the Obama presidency, that you worked sort of tirelessly. I would imagine. I'm sure it was amazing, but it must have been also sort of just exhausting. Yeah. And I wonder, your outside life, your personal life, your family life, did you feel as if you sort of had to put some parts of that on hold during those years, or how did you sort of maintain a balance with those two things?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'll say that, for 9 years, I worked at the Chicago Tribune, based in their Washington bureau. And that was actually, I had a lot more flexibility then, even though I did do some international assignments where I was gone for a month or 6 weeks. Or for the most part, I was around to be a part of Patty's two kids as they were growing up. So that was fortuitous in that sense,
Yeah.
By the time I joined the White House staff, they were young adults. So,
Okay.
and I didn't have much of a personal life. We're in Madison because my wife, when she retired from teaching, said she wanted to move here, and I just went, okay. Because I figured everything that I had put her through for 8 years, if that's what she wants to do, let's do it.
Wow.
But I mean, I kind of missed like every birthday, wedding of friends, funerals. I missed everything. I'd say most of my friends that did not live in the DC area, I didn't see for 8 years.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
that's a long period of time to go without connecting with people. I remember, I think it was the week after I left the White House, this friend of mine in Atlanta called me, and I hadn't heard from him in 8 years. And he just calls me out of the blue, and he goes, "It's Frank." And and I said, "How come I haven't heard from you, Frank?" And he's like, "Well, I didn't want to bother you." And I was like, "Wait, you didn't want to bother me for 8 years? Come on, man." So anyway, that's
Such a Frank. It sounds like such a Frank thing to do.
yeah, it's a Frank thing.
Did you have guilt around that, or were you able to think about it as though this is wasn't a once in a lifetime opportunity because you'd had a similar opportunity, decades before, but that you were doing this public service really as you use the phrase visual historian, and you were, as you said, the right person, the best person to do the job. Did that sort of help you get through that period and sort of justify that I'm doing this very important thing that really nobody else should be doing, and I'll return back to, maybe more of a normal life when this is over? It can't go longer than 8 years, right?
Well, I mean, I tried to tell myself that, but that's a hard thing to do. Especially one of the people that worked for me at the White House died of cancer during the administration, and his funeral was when we were in some Asian country. I don't even remember. So missing that was really hard. Yeah. So it was there guilt? Yeah, there was some guilt, but I tried to justify it by, I didn't ever want to miss anything. You never know when history is going to unfold, and it would be harder to live with myself if I took a weekend off and the shit hit the fan while I was an hour away lying on a beach or something like that. I don't want people to feel sorry for me or anything like that, because I did this to myself. My attitude was, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it, I'm going to go all in and do it the right way.
You, over the decades, have put yourself in some very physically challenging, some very, frankly, very dangerous, risky situations, war zones, for example. And I wonder, what kinds of conversations are you having with your wife, kids, your parents, even before making the decision to put yourself in those situations? And then I think maybe the flip side is, if one of your kids or grandkids one day decides that they want to pursue their passion, choose a career that has some of those inherent risks, how would you kind of advise them based on your own experience and your decisions?
Yeah, I mean, I am not and was not a conflict photographer. I did cover the Kosovo refugee exodus. I was not inside Kosovo while that war was going on. I couldn't get in. I probably would have gotten in if I could have. Afghanistan, I remember saying to my wife something along the lines of, this is maybe a month after 9/11. This is my generation's Pearl Harbor. I have to document this. I didn't know really what I was getting myself into, because what we were attempting to do was get across the northern border, which was still, northern Afghanistan was still under the control of the U.S.-backed Northern Alliance. And so I thought we'd be pretty safe there. But then a colleague and I decided to try to make it across the mountains to be, close to Kabul where the fighting was taking place. And so I had, a few days there was like we were right in the midst of sniper fire and rocket-propelled grenades and tank fire, where, I'm probably in some ways lucky that I'm sitting here right now, because there were a couple of close calls. But I think I learned from that I was not actually good at that. There's some people, James Knockway, Lindsay Addario, Tyler Hicks, that, thrive and are able to do a really great job in conflict situations. I did an okay job, but I realized that it was not my thing, that this was not something that I was probably going to do again.
It seems like the lesson there, maybe the message to younger people would be, A, trust your instincts. And if it's not something you want to do, then don't do it. But also, if you think you might want to do it, the only way that you're going to find out whether you do or not, or whether you're good at it or not, is to do it.
Well, and don't do it the way I did it, which is, most of the journalists and photojournalists before they went to Afghanistan went through training. I did not have a flak jacket. There was another photographer that was with me. When I say with me, I mean he was within my space the day we had some close calls, and he got shot by sniper fire in the back, but he had a flak jacket on. So he got hurt, but not that bad. And, if that had happened to me, I would have been killed. But I mean, I think that one concern that I've heard in conflict situations is, I was 40-ish when I went to Afghanistan. So I was, seasoned guy in terms of being a photojournalist. But I think there's a lot of kids like just coming right out of college want to go right to war zones. And that's a dangerous thing to do, I think.
So thinking about what it was you were documenting, particularly during your time with President Barack Obama. I mean, obviously him and the situations and some of the historical monumental events that took place during his presidency. But there's also this sort of slew of qualities that you were regularly documenting: kindness, respect, empathy, compassion, the importance of doing hard work. I mean, your work highlights the president. It's one of the most high profile instances or examples of those kinds of qualities. And without necessarily going too far down that road, I mean, it does feel like we've sort of lost sight of the importance of those things in the last few years. And I just wonder what it means to you to have captured those examples and have those to be able to share with people all over the world. And I think specifically, I think about it from sort of the perspective of like a father for children, to have these things, this enormous, I think I read 1.9 million photographs you've captured over the course of this time. What does it mean to you to sort of have been the person who's captured so many of these examples?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. The power to me of the still photograph, one of the things that I always strive to do in my photography, especially during the Obama administration, was to make authentic photographs. I think a photograph can be a powerful document in some ways more so than words. Oftentimes you could see the character of this particular man in not just the way that he went about making decisions, but in the way he interacted with other people, respectfully, as you said, kindly, at times angrily, because we all have those emotions occasionally, right? And understanding, one of the first time that we had a national tragedy when he was president was a shooting at Fort Hood.
Oh, yeah.
In 2009. I think it was towards the end of the year. And I forget how many people were shot and killed, but it was quite a few. And you're suddenly thrust into that situation where, the president flies to a memorial service at Fort Hood. But what people don't see was him having to meet each of the families. What's worse than having somebody in their 20s just be shot and killed, and their life it's over, and then you're the parent, or in some cases the wife, having to meet the president of the United States under these circumstances. Nobody teaches you. There's no 5-point bullet list on here's what you do when you're president of the United States and you have to go greet families after a national tragedy when a dozen people have been shot and killed. There's no book that tells you how to do this. I could see, I wouldn't say nervousness, but didn't know what to expect, I guess is probably the best way to do it. And learn that, people just wanted to be able to tell the president of the United States about their son or daughter or husband, and maybe show them pictures, and maybe some of them wanted a hug, and Michelle went on that trip as well. That's something that he had to do too many times in his presidency. Newtown, which is highlighted in the doc film, was the worst of them because it involved, 20 first grade kids, and think about what that's done to, 20 different families.
That is such an example of how to be empathetic and compassionate, or even, or how to just be there for another human being. To me, that's one of the most important things about what you've done with your collection of photography, is capturing these moments of a really wonderful example of how to be a good human being.
And also to know, in his particular case, what his election meant for so many young people of color.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That they are just becoming aware maybe of our political leaders, and to see somebody that looks like them in the Oval Office. I mean, the picture that comes to mind is the young 5-year-old kid, Jacob Philadelphia, when he came into the Oval Office and had said to the president that his friends had told him that his haircut was just like President Obama's. And with that, President Obama bent over and said, go ahead and touch it.
At a 90-degree angle. I mean, what an amazing, iconic photograph.
Yeah.
It was one of those photographs that, we talked about timing, anticipation. I had no idea this was going to happen, right?
Right.
I have one frame. It's one frame.
Oh, man.
Click. And it was over. Fortunately, it was in focus, and you see his hand touching his head. It's funny, he's not to drop names, but I'll go ahead and drop a name. I was having this conversation with Steven Spielberg. I saw him at some event a couple of years ago. I think it was a birthday party for President Obama, and he liked the documentary film, so that's why he came over and started talking to me. Right? He's thought it was great, and that he's fascinated with still photography, and so he was asking about that particular photograph, and he wanted to know what was the frame right before it and what was the frame right after it. And I had to go back and look. So the frame right before it is President Obama bending over. I've got a picture of just him bending, and Jacobs hasn't done anything yet. And the next picture is Jacob touching his own head.
Oh, wow.
Which is really kind of cool, I thought.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's an interesting segue because, well, I love the theme of Obama in particular interacting with young people. I think those photos are so wholesome, so genuine. In the documentary, it's discussed how, his daughter sort of grew up in the White House, and over those 8 years became young adults, but he just had such a way with young people, and you do such a wonderful job of capturing that. But to your point about Spielberg's question, what was the frame before and what was the frame after? I think so many photographers now, just because technology allows for it, sort of just press down the shutter and they'll get 40 photos of any given moment and have the flexibility to choose that one perfect one that hits it right at the moment. And clearly you come from sort of a different school of photography where you have to really consider it. Sure, there's moments where you only have that one, you're banking on your experience to make sure that you compose it correctly and you're in focus and expose it correctly and you get your shot and you either get lucky or you don't, right? But there's so much more flexibility now, and people don't have to necessarily have that history and skill set in order to be able to take or make, in to use your language, amazing photographs. And I got thinking when preparing for this, we got my, daughters who are 9 and 6 a couple of years ago for Christmas, just a little Polaroid camera, one of the little mini Polaroid ones that you can get from wherever, Target, and a couple packs of these Polaroid sheets. And they started snapping off these photos. And of course, they're used to grabbing our iPhones and running around and taking photos of whatever they want. And they started taking these Polaroids and, it was looking at the floor or looking at the ceiling or half of somebody's face. And I found myself inclined to sit them down and say, you can use this camera however you want. Take pictures of whatever you want. However, you have this limited number of sheets.
Yeah.
And you may just want to think about, yeah, exactly. They're not cheap, but you may want to think about what to you makes for an interesting photograph, tells an interesting story. And if that is your feet, then that's fine. But just trying to, I guess, give them an ounce of discipline on being a little bit less haphazard and trying to break away from this notion of, I can shoot 1,000 photos and it doesn't matter what they are because if one of them's cool, I can put it on Instagram.
I don't disagree with you, but I will say that you can have 30 frames a second, but if you're not anticipating, the moment, you could still be a little late.
Oh, yeah.
And not get it. I think, when mirrorless cameras weren't quite where they are during the Obama administration as they are today. I was still using a DSLR, which made a little noise, which is a Canon 5D system. It's pretty quiet. But so I had kind of taken the approach that in these private situations in the Oval Office Situation Room, I was not ever going to do the, motor drive kind of thing. And so I was just in a routine of click, waiting, click, waiting for the moment and not doing the rapid fire.
Somebody said the word story a minute ago. I mean, there's the anticipation piece, there's the timing piece, but there's also just like understanding how to tell a story and the nuance of only showing so much of something that I think is a thing that we just with this ability to just take whatever and delete the stuff you don't like. I mean, it's just fully lost, I feel like, in that.
No, I mean, I do use the word like make a photograph instead of take a photograph.
Yeah.
And it's kind of an Ansel Adams thing, and Ansel was a completely different kind of photographer than I was, obviously, landscape photographer, that a lot of different technical aspects going into his work than mine. But I say that mostly because I want people to ask me, why do you do that? And I can say to them, because I look at it as there's actually some thought into what I'm doing. Like I'm consciously trying to look through that viewfinder and compose the picture the way it should best be framed. I'm waiting for the moment. I'm trying to decide, what to keep in the frame, what to keep out of the frame, what should my background be. All that kind of stuff is going through my mind a lot of times intuitively. And so that's why I use the word make, because I just want people to know that there's actually some thought to every time I push that shutter.
Pete, you have a number of books out. You mentioned the Obama book, Obama: An Intimate Portrait. Of course, there is the book Shade: A Tale of Two Presidents, which you have cover a lot of that same subject matter on your social media. We're going to link to all of this, and I hope that parents listening will check out some of those books. And please check out the documentary on Amazon Prime. Is there anywhere specific that you like to direct people to purchase your books? Are you a big advocate of local bookstores?
Yeah, I like local bookstores. I try to support local bookstores here in Madison. And Marc was talking about some of the characteristics of President Obama. And I swear he was reading from one book that you haven't mentioned, which may appeal to your audience, which was called Dream Big Dreams.
Oh yeah.
It's for young readers. So it's the chapters are all the things that you were mentioning: work hard, be kind, respectful, all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
And it delves into his presidency, but for, I'd say, between 9 and 12-year-old in that. So some of your audience may enjoy that book. It's a small book.
Yeah.
It's maybe, 50 pages or something like that.
Yeah.
Sounds like a great holiday gift for parents listening for your kids.
Yeah.
Well, Pete, thank you so much for the time that you've spent with us. I mean, you're very, very generous with your time. I would again encourage parents listening, check out the books. They're incredible. Check out the documentary. It's incredible. Is there anything else that you're working on that you would like for people to know about?
Not that I can share yet.
Okay.
Ooh, okay.
But stay tuned. Probably another couple years, maybe.
Then follow Pete Souza on Instagram and any other social media links that you can find in our show notes to be in the loop when he makes the big announcement about whatever this project is.
Yeah. Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
That's great. Thanks so much,
Thanks.
Pete.
This was wonderful.
Absolute pleasure. Yeah.
Have a good night.
In lieu of a recurring segment, we talked real briefly at the top of the episode about how you had a birthday.
I did.
I mean, we had Halloween.
We had Halloween.
You hosted a great Halloween party.
And I hope you had a nice time.
I had a great time. Met some of your buddies that I hadn't met before. The kids had a blast. I ate a Rice Krispie treat that was orange.
I didn't get any of those. They went fast.
It was good. And then you turned 40 something. You had a birthday.
Doesn't matter. 40 something.
Well, how was the birthday though?
It was very nice. My wonderful wife, Jamie, planned, unbeknownst to me, an outing for the two of us. We went on a little date night. And we had babysitter, and the kids were stoked about that. The kids loved that.
Brendan.
It was not Brendan. It was an actual babysitter. And so, me and the missus, we went into Portsmouth to a little jazz club called Jimmy's. And we had some delicious cocktails by the fire. And then we listened to some incredible jazz music from the famed Fred Hirsch trio.
Yeah.
A guy whose name I'm a little embarrassed to admit I was not familiar with.
But he blew you away.
It was incredible. It was incredible. And I've looked him up obviously since then, and the guy's been around for a donkey's age, played with some of the greatest, people in the business, and has done a ton for jazz over the last 4 decades. And then the next day was kind of like a little bit of a lazy day.
Bit of a headache.
But it was good. It was all good. But we got my brother and his kids together, and we went out for lunch, and then we ended up here at the house. And then the neighbors' kids came over, and then the neighbors themselves came over, and it was just hanging out, living life with kids running around, running amok, but having the time of their lives. Those moments, man, are just kind of increasingly clear to me that that's what it's all about.
That's what it's about.
That's what this whole trips around the sun are all about.
Well, I think that brings us to the end of the episode of Modern Dadhood featuring Pete Souza. I'll tell you that. Again, listeners, you can find every episode of Modern Dadhood at our website, moderndadhood.com,
It's
or
on the internet.
any of the places where you find podcasts, like Apple Music, or Apple Podcasts,
Don't
or
say Stitcher.
Amazon Music, or Spotify. I wasn't even going to say Stitcher. Maybe I almost went there.
You were.
While you're on our website, please check out the shop, where you can find t-shirts and dad hoodies. There's plenty of time to order those for them to be delivered to you or a loved one before the holidays. While you're on our
that would be
website,
nice.
you can
That would be
also
nice.
link to our social media platforms. You can send us an email on the form. You can sign up for our email list. What else we got, Mark? Did I say all of it?
You did. I mean, our email address, if you would like to email us directly, is HEY@moderndadhood.com. We're on all the social medias, not all of them.
Wherever you would expect 2 40-plus-year-old dudes to post stuff.
MySpace,
Friendster, ICQ.
on our Tumblr page. What about some thanks? Why don't we say thank you to some friends of ours, Casper Baby Pants, Spencer Albee, who do so much for the music on our show. How about Pete Morse? Another Pete. Oh man, I just dawned on me. Pete Morse at Red Vault Audio. Check him out at redvaultaudio.com.
Thank you to Pete Souza for entertaining our request to join us on the show and talk about, photography and history and fatherhood and grandfatherhood. He is an awesome dude. There's links to a lot of his work, including his many books, in our show notes. The final thank you, Mark. It's always goes to you.
Oh, and thank you for listening.
Podcast. Just a modern.